Hello kindred longevity lifestyle designers, this is Zach here with secretsoflongevity.com, and I had someone recently ask me about how to accelerate the healing or even initiate the healing of a joint problem. This is something I've heard a few people come to me asking about. I've talked to people about it one-on-one, but I wanted to make a video on it because I feel like I've compiled a lot of good strategies, techniques, dietary things you can do, but also non-dietary things related to help bring about the complete, accelerated, and better healing. So even perhaps in some cases you might be able to get your joints healthier than they were before just by incorporating some of these things. So all those benefits from following this are a possibility. Of course you can't make guarantees, but virtually any joint problem, unless it's so horrific that perhaps you need a joint replacement. I am personally of the thought that any level of injury is possible to be reversed. For instance, babies can have the tips of their fingers sliced off, but they can actually regrow the nail bed and the finger completely, and there won't be scarring. And children that have scars are much less likely to have those scars later on in life. So we know that the body is doing something to heal it, but this ability to heal gets reduced over time for a wide variety of reasons, but in large part that is actually the enzyme power in the body becoming reduced. So when it comes to something like the joints, that's a very complex part of the body, depending on what joint it is. Specifically the knee is very complex in its function. The shoulder is too. If it's like a joint in your finger, that might not be the most difficult thing to heal. I've healed several joint injuries myself. I had injuries to first knuckle on the end here. I guess I had other ones too. I can't remember where they were, but just basically following a more holistic, cleansing at times type of diet, these have healed up perfectly to the point where I don't even notice them. There's no residual pain that comes about from them. So number one thing I'm going to recommend, and obviously if you're vegan or vegetarian this might not be on your list of things you want to do, but probably you should consider it, or consider a food that's high in this substance, and that is bone broth. So the substance in bone broth, although there's many things, number one is going to be that you're getting from this is glycine, which is a protein that is very high in certain amino acids that aren't necessarily essential, but we might not get as much of them in our diets as could be beneficial. Off the top of my head I can't remember exactly what amino acids those are, but you can always look up glycine, Glycine, to find out exactly what it's composed of. I think it's about 20 amino acid chain. But the idea behind that is it's a very anti-inflammatory protein. So you can, when you consume large amounts of it in bone broth, because it's so rich in the bones and the joints, when you boil those, simmer them on the stove for about 2 days, you're going to get that glycine and these very great minerals in the broth that when you store it in the fridge, for instance, it's going to turn to jello at the top. So bone is obviously calcium, and its lattice work or matrix, the bone matrix, is composed of many things. Two of the big dominant minerals are phosphorus and calcium, but it also contains a lot of collagen. And this is even higher in the joints, so when you think of the joint caps and the cartilage, that is all largely glycine. So when you're simmering bone broth on the stove for 2 days, this is all getting broken up and dispersed into this stock. You don't need to have meat on the bones, but if you do, you can always save that, take it out, and then add it back into a soup later. You can make soups out of the broth, so you can drink it straight. You can make smoothies out of it, or blended soups out of it. Lots of different ways you can consume bone broth. You can make jello, sort of like a whole food based jello if you wanted to blend fruit into that and then put it back in the fridge. The other interesting thing about bone broth, it's kind of unrelated to joint repair, but just in terms of health and longevity, is studies on calorie restriction have also shown that they can get the exact same results, at least in animals, by restricting the amino acid tryptophan. So some people's diets are very high in tryptophan, and while it's an essential amino acid, we don't need massive quantities of it. And if these studies are correct, getting a protein source that is deficient in tryptophan can offset the abundance of tryptophan in other foods, like the more flesh-based meats, but also it's high in certain vegetarian sources of protein as well. So the idea behind that is that when that's lower, all these other factors come into play that have possibly the same benefits as calorie restriction. However, you can do this without restricting your calories and losing weight, etc. So if you want to learn more about that, just search it. I don't have the article on hand. You could just search calorie restriction, glycine, tryptophan, and see what comes up. But yeah, if you have the components and constituents from the bones and joints of an animal that you've turned into a broth, from the bones and joints of that animal, then when you consume that, obviously that's giving your body the materials, the basic building blocks to start the repair, and also bring down the inflammation around an injured joint. So definitely start that if you aren't doing that. Some of the next best things to do are consuming other foods that are high in collagen. So I was saying glycine all throughout that last portion where I was talking about the bone broth, but it's the collagen that contains the glycine. That's what I wanted to clarify. So other foods that are very high in collagen, probably the next one is going to be elk antler or deer antler. This is Survival's elk antler. You can find that at links below. Various types of collagen and precursors to helping the body build these things, so growth factors that stimulate the production of collagen and regrowth of tissue. So I think for the repair of anything, whether it's an organ, joint, muscle tissue, anything, elk antler is probably one of the best things you can be taking because it has that very powerful stimulating effect to growth, and it will definitely go to those places in your body where that needs to occur. It's subtle. It's not like taking ginseng where it's a very powerful energy boost, but this is going to be going to those areas of the body and giving you what you need to start rebuilding that tissue. So with this, you always want to remember that it's in an alcohol solution. You just hold it under the tongue for, I like to do it for at least a minute and a half, 90 seconds to 2 minutes, and that way you're getting the IGF-1, the other growth factors into the bloodstream sublingually, as opposed to it getting possibly broken down the digestive system. You're still going to get some effect, but it's better to hold it in the mouth for as long as you can. And you actually notice it gets thick if you swish it around with your saliva, and that's actually the collagen, and you can swallow that and you're going to get the benefits of the collagen through digesting it. So I'm also working on an article on elk antler, which you can expect to see at some point over the summer, and yeah, if you want to grab it, there's a link below at Survival, and that helps support me by purchasing through that link. There's 2 levels. There's the silver and the gold. Obviously the gold is stronger. It's twice the strength of the silver. So if you've got a really serious injury, going through a bottle a week is not unrealistic if it's within your budget. I've heard an amazing story about one person who had a broken femur from, I think, a car accident, and she repaired it in, I think the doctor said something like 3 to 4 times faster than they ever heard of anyone else repairing from that kind of an injury. So really, that really proved to her that the effectiveness of this. So the next thing is going to be to consume MSM-containing foods. This is sulfur-containing foods. MSM or sulfur for that matter. Number 1 is going to be aloe, in my opinion. Aloe vera. It's got multiple things going for it. It's going to be highly anti-inflammatory, very cooling. You can literally put it, if you have the leaves, I've shown them in past videos how to fillet them. Cut the spines down the side, then you fillet it. Put the gel in a smoothie, make it into a lemonade or something. And then you could use the leaves with the mucilaginous portion of it on the outside. You could wrap that around a joint if it's really bad and that's going to absorb to a certain extent. And so you're getting anti-inflammatory effect, you're getting MSM, which is literally contained in the aloe, and you're also getting a high amount of ormus minerals, which, especially if it was grown in rainwater, it's going to be high in that. And joints have that levitational property. David Wolf talks a lot about this. If you want to learn more about that, just search Ormus online. There's interesting pockets to learn more about that. It's definitely an untouched territory by a lot of people. They think it might sound too woo-woo or something like that, new agey, but when you get into it, there is some legitimate science behind it, so consider it as an important factor that is very concentrated in the joints, that if you have joint problems of any kind, you might want to consider taking that or taking an Ormus supplement of some type. And of course, onions, garlic, and egg yolks, or just eat the whole eggs, are going to be containing a lot of sulfur as well. There's a lot of other foods. You just search sulfur-containing foods online and you'll find a list of the highest sources for that. So joints are very high in sulfur, so it's going to incorporate itself into rebuilding joint tissue. And you will also want to perhaps consider taking straight MSM. I always recommend the whole food form of it, which is extracted from pine trees. Omica is the brand that makes that. Haven't used it myself personally. I've used the synthetic MSM, but I don't totally feel comfortable using that long term because it's a petroleum byproduct. But that's probably better than nothing, and I have noticed the profound effects it has on accelerating hair and nail growth. So it's pretty powerful stuff, and that stands for methylsulfonomethane. So some other herbs you can consider. Number one is eucommia bark. It's a Chinese tonic herb. It's a yang jing tonic. It's specifically implicated for tendon, cartilage, and ligament strengthening and rebuilding. So if you've ever seen it before, I don't have it on hand, but when you pull it apart, it's got almost like spider webby type material that is in between the pieces of bark. And so by the law of doctrine of signatures, we're going to say that that's almost like ligaments in the plant. It's, I believe it's a cousin of the rubber tree, the tree that eucommia bark comes from. So when you boil that into a tea, or if you would get a eucommia extract or a tincture, you're getting those constituents that are in that sort of fibrous quality that has obviously some correlation to what our joints and ligaments are made out of. Next up, for sort of a nutritional program, if you're wanting to go full on and do everything possible, I'd highly recommend using colostrum. You can get sort of colostrum from Surthrival, spray dried, kept raw, from either in the large tub at 1 kilogram or the small 6.5 ounce tub. And again, you can get those at the link below as well. There's a lot of growth factors in this, a lot of anti-inflammatory factors. It's very anti-inflammatory, especially for the gut, but also for the joints. And I've heard another amazing story, and again, this is just anecdotal. Someone literally regrowing a ligament. It's pretty extreme and out there, kind of defies what is possible in the medical paradigm, but this is just someone's claim. Who's to know what it's actually about? But if that's true, that's quite remarkable. The IGF-1 and the whole 80 plus growth factors that are contained in colostrum are quite profound in their effect. There's also the bacterial constituents and the immunomodulatory constituents, which all help in boosting the body's capabilities of bringing down inflammation in general. So if you want to find out more about colostrum, I do have an article that I've written about it. You can check out the link below. And I've got other videos on YouTube about it, so I'll post part 1 of a video on colostrum here, and you can click that and it'll open a new window. And I'll post my last video here, which was on colostrum, to learn a bit about the science behind it and sort of the counter view to what some of the skeptics are saying. So yeah, click either of those 2 links to get more information on that. The next thing that I would recommend looking into, and again, this is kind of getting higher up on the price scale, but I have heard some great things about this. I've never experienced it myself, but I know that a lot of healing centers are using these types of therapies, and that's injecting ozone and or oxygen. So that sounds pretty extreme. You'd be injecting it into the joint itself, not literally into sticking a needle into the joint, but just in the area of the joint, and the blood would obviously take those compounds into the area. You'd probably want to work with a practitioner for this for sure. Look more into it. I haven't studied it that in depth, but I do know that these are very safe things to do, just by the fact that the Hippocrates Health Institute uses these kinds of things. I believe Keeper Cousins at the Tree of Life might be using it as well. And yeah, I've heard some miraculous stories about accelerated healing, especially of really old injuries that were very stubborn in getting better. Probably even going up another level on the price would be stem cell therapy. If this is within your range of abilities to obtain, go for it. It's remarkable, the research that's out there on this. Personally, I have no problems with the ethics behind it. I think it should be done, there should be liberal research on it, but obviously there's going to be people that are trying to stop that, and when it comes to using fetuses, that's not necessarily the best thing ethically. But what's starting to look like a really amazing resource is cord blood, stem cells that are contained within the blood of the umbilical cord, which they're starting to save in many hospitals around North America. If you actually want to get this done, I'm not aware of where you could get it done in the US, but I know that you can get it done in, I believe, in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, or in perhaps another area in the Netherlands, but somewhere in the Netherlands they're doing that. And definitely just search cord blood stem cell therapy in the Netherlands, and you'll find out where there's places that are offering that for whatever price that it costs. There's other forms of stem cell therapy that are being researched and developed, and they're all worthwhile and give really remarkable possibilities to how completely and deeply we can repair tissue that is unlike what we've been able to do in the past, at least in terms of the mainstream medical paradigm. So perhaps if you were to do that without doing any of this other stuff, that might have the most profound, fast, and complete effect. But of course, when you're adding in all the things that help build the tissue, your body can start to do it itself, and it's just, even in combination with that, these therapies, it's going to be the best situation of all. Probably the best thing you can do exercise-wise is to, first of all, not exercise that joint in terms of vigorous exercise. So don't do weightlifting, don't do really intense yoga stretching, especially if it was an injury from a yoga posture. Don't do extensive running if it's a knee injury or even a lower back injury. Don't do basically anything that would hurt you or that you feel pain as it's happening. Obviously, if you're a professional athlete, to what degree that you have this injury happening, you're going to have to decide if you need to take time off or not. There's other ways you can keep your body in shape without doing the actual sport that you might be having to do as a career. But doing these protocols are going to help accelerate and make your healing more complete. So the best thing to do is to have very fluid, slow movements of the joint. The best thing for this, in my opinion, is the program created by Pavel Tsatsouline, which is called Super Joints. They're exercises I do on a fairly regular basis, and it involves bringing circulation, blood flow, and awareness to those joints. And there's a sort of systematic way of working from head to toe with very light, very easy, very actually kind of fun, and you feel invigorated afterwards. It's kind of Qigong-like type exercises that yeah, have a very healing effect, and it's long-term daily use that gives you the results. This can also be used preventatively. It strengthens ligaments, tendons, helps increase the fluid in between the joints and preserving that. And when you're bringing the blood flow there, if you're consuming these things that are going to be rebuilding the joints, if you've got, for example, an elbow injury and you're doing an exercise for the elbow and it's bringing blood flow to that area, obviously if you've just eaten or you've been doing these supplements and foods, superfoods, they're going to be getting into that area and doing their work. So that's probably the best thing you can do in combination with the cheaper things that I already mentioned, like the colostrum, deer antler. Bone broth is definitely the cheapest. A pound of bones at some butchers costs around $2 to $3. So, also on the topic of bone broth, make sure it's grass-fed animals, pasture-raised, organic, of course. In addition to these sort of fluid-type movements that you would be doing in the program Super Joints, and by the way, there's a link below for Pavel's book on this. You can also get the DVD, one or the other. It's well worth it, and it will help you in terms of longevity of preserving your joints, preventing arthritis, preventing degeneration of those areas. So two other things you can check out or try doing is, number one, it's free and easy, is grounding, so going outside barefoot. The research on this has shown that arthritis symptoms get reduced when you're electrically touching the earth in terms of barefoot. There's something that occurs with the sloughing off of static buildup from EMFs and dirty electricity around the house, and just generally not being grounded and touching the earth, which in and of itself can mess up our circadian rhythms. So healing happens better when we're in this type of an alignment with the earth. You can also get grounding pads from various companies that plug in to the grounding rod, and they have silver lining through the bed sheet. I've got several of those that I use and swear by. And then another strategy you can look into is using rare earth magnets, or what are they made of? They're very high intensity magnets. Again, this isn't something I'm an expert on. You can look for more information on the net about that. But I know that you'd use the North Pole side, and having used one on a few occasions, I've noticed actual changes in the way an area felt on my body from using it. So you'd use them at night. You'd probably put, if you say you had a knee injury, you'd tape or attach 2 magnets on either side of your knee, facing with the North Pole side in, and the way to test that is obviously with a compass, the side that attracts, I believe, the North Pole. It might be the side that attracts the South Pole, because then it would be pointing towards the north. Again, you have to do your research, but the north side is the side that is more regenerative. The south side is more stimulating, which some people say could be a problem if you have cancers or other things that would you don't want to have growing inside you. Lastly, I would recommend that you consider doing a bit of energy work on yourself in that area. This is something that I've done, which completely healed my wrist of a really stubborn fracture I had. It was a green stick fracture when I was very young from snowboarding, and it just was not healing. It was always painful. Just not even doing anything would be painful. I mean, I have to say that it does, if I do a handstand, it does ache a little bit if I accidentally go over and I kind of like really jar it down, because that's how it broke, is what went back like that. But the degree to which it had been hurting before and after doing some of these exercises, it really improved. So I'm not going to go into great detail on how to do that. I've done a video on this if you want to learn about that. It's basically you just lie there, or you sit in a comfortable chair and relax, close your eyes and go very deep into yourself, and you're working with visualization / tactualization, I want to say, more of a feeling centered awareness type of exercise, so you don't have to be stuck on having to visualize, because some people aren't as able to do that as easily or even at all as compared to someone that's just working with the sense of touch. So I'm not going to go into detail, like I said. Check out that video. I got it posted right here if you want to click through and watch that. I just wanted to touch on a few things that you want to avoid if you have joint issues going on of any type, and that is, there's going to be 2 things that are often touted as being good for the joints by the people that sell the supplements, by people that use it and think it's working for them in some way, and that's chondroitin and glucosamine. These have been shown in studies to be no better than placebos, and one massive study showed they have no effect. Yes, they're being absorbed in terms of being digested and broken down, but there's no indication that those compounds are being sent to the joints to be used for that purpose. So I think it's crab shell and basically shellfish shells that are used in chondroitin. Not the best kind of things you want to be putting into your body when those can be easily contaminated with heavy metals, especially with these bottom feeders. Crabs generally are low in heavy metals in their flesh, but their shells are a different matter. So there's also calcium-forming organisms that can be found in these things, which can further cause problems in the joints. And those are tiny virus-sized bacteria that replicate and form like calcification in the body. It's really basically the root cause of disease, of all diseases. So on that topic, you also want to avoid calcium supplements. That's anything made from chalk, ground up seashells, basically any inorganic material which is something that is not a living thing, so not a plant or animal. So dairy is great for bone health, not that implicated in joint health, and specifically raw grass-fed dairy I'm speaking about. And then obviously green plants, green juice, kale, these kinds of things, sprouts are fantastic for bone health as well as joint health in their detoxifying effect. So consider taking in a lot of greens if you're doing healing work on yourself of any type. And of course the magnesium in them is going to be very relaxing to the muscles, which in turn allows for joints to expand. If you've got a tense lower back, you're going to have joint pain. You're going to be compressing the discs in the spine. So having enough magnesium is very important. Greens are high in this, algae, certain nuts and seeds, chia seed is high in magnesium, and there's a lot of other places, chocolate of course, and that can be a good indulgence if you're sick in terms of an injury to help accelerate the healing. A lot of sulfur in there too, which is good for the joints as we talked about. So that sums up all my strategies that I've put together. If you've got questions or comments, leave them both below. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet. Thumbs up the video if you like the ideas or if it's helped you. And yeah, if you have had benefits from these types of things, or if you've started to do these and you want to come back to this video and explain your benefits that you've experienced, by all means do so. I'd be curious to hear. So also remember to check out the links in the drop-down menu below. And with that, take care and embrace life without limits.